Hi everybody, my name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bush Radical. Today it's raining and pouring and it's nasty here in interior Alaska, and it reminds me a lot of Vancouver Island. I wanted to take a second to do the thing that everyone from Alone wishes they could do, and that's tell their untold stories. Every one of us has had amazing things that have happened to us during the Alone experience that never made it to TV. And unfortunately, a lot of those stories, they may never be told. A lot of folks don't have YouTube channels or podcasts or any of that stuff. So today I want to do the thing that every one of us from Alone wants to do. That's tell their untold stories. Stay tuned. Okay, so for starters, I almost didn't make it on Alone. Nobody really knows that, but about a week before we were to go to Vancouver Island, I got the worst case of bronchitis. A couple weeks after boot camp was the time we were getting ready to go to Vancouver Island, and I had such horrible bronchitis. When they came out to shoot the scene of us leaving home and saying goodbye to everybody, they wanted to do some more shots of that the next day. I was so sick, I literally told the camera guy, I'm like, I can't do it, I've got to go to the hospital. I couldn't breathe. Like putting that big pack on and walking around and stuff to get that shot, I couldn't breathe. And when we went to the airport, I was walking like one step, just, I had no breath at all. I just could not breathe. But I'd had a whole course of antibiotics and I was hoping it would flush out by the time launch day rolled around. We were actually at the lodge at Quatsino for 5 or 6 days, maybe even 7 days before I really turned the corner. I'd walk up the steps to our room and just hack and cough and try to clear your lungs out. Pete Brockdorf one day, he's like, "Was that you hacking?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you okay? You a smoker?" I'm like, "No, I had a bit of a chest cold." So anyway, the thought of hiking with that condition was, I just kept my mouth shut. I didn't say a word to nobody. I walked around kind of lightheaded a bit because I just didn't have enough oxygen. But about day 8, I really turned the corner. And by lunch, I figured, worst case scenario, I'll just sit out in the woods a few days around a little fire and recuperate before I make that slog across Vancouver Island. Story number 2. This is one of the things I remember the most from the entire trip out there. And it was on day 4 of the hike. And I camped in that spot. You see it on TV. It's a bare level spot. It was 1 in a million. There's nothing like it out there. And the following morning I got up and I was headed through this area that was nice and bright. There was hardly any trees through there. And one thing about Vancouver Island, everything is backwards. You climb to the top of a hill looking for a nice dry area and you might find a swamp on top of a hill. Where it looked like it was going to clear out and it was brighter, you know, you look like it'd be easier going. There's a bush called salal, and salal is almost like a vine. It grows like 10 feet high and it kind of grows, it interweaves with itself. And it was like walking through a shrub. And this patch of salal, it stretched as far as I could see both directions, just bright area and bush. And it took me probably 2.5 hours to get 300 feet through this salal. And I had to go through it, there was no way around it. By the time I got to the end of that, I was so give out and just mentally just fatigued from it. I couldn't bring myself to go into another patch. If I saw a big patch of salal, I don't know what I would have done. It was so amazingly thick. And with a pack on, there were times I'd just stop in the salal and kind of lean over and it holds you up. It was horrible. Scarred me mentally. Terrible deal. You can sure hear the rain on the roof right now. It's pouring out here. So on day 1, when they dropped me off with the green helicopter, I wish this would have made TV because I actually filmed it. I was standing there in like this estuary and it's pouring rain. And I'm just trying to get my bearings, and I think after the helicopter left, I probably stood there a half hour, just kind of taking stock of what I was gonna do, and I was just gonna camp for the night. And as I'm sitting there, I got my glasses off, you know, and I wear glasses a lot. I don't really need them, but if I'm reading, I have to have them. So I had my glasses off, and all of a sudden, this big brown hairy thing comes running out of the woods right towards me. And it just shocked me, because I didn't expect anything like that, you know. I'd only been there 20 minutes and I'm getting charged. I'm like, oh, it's an otter. It was a massive river otter. Not a sea otter, it was a river otter. And it just comes running out towards me, and I'm like, well, that's pretty cool, I filmed it. But there was about 1 second like, whoa, because it was coming right at me. I'm like, hey, you know, I'm filming this guy, and he stops and looks, turns around, and he goes right back the way he came, just the way he had come. But it was a cool little bit. I wish they'd have showed that. Speaking of day one, you guys know I took a Condor Hudson Bay knife. It's a big knife. Big simple knife. It's thick and strong. And well, when I got there on day one, after the chopper dropped me off, after I got charged by the otter, I was thinking, you know, I'm gonna make a walking stick. Something that's, you know, 7 foot tall, that you can just pull yourself along with it if you need to. And I cut down this hemlock. It was about this big around, and limbed it. Now that knife I had, it's made out of 1075 carbon steel. It's kind of a softer steel, and those hemlock knots are like stone. They're so hard. When I got done limbing that sapling, my knife it looked like a saw. It was so screwed up. It had turned that blade and dented that blade, and I mean, it was just ragged. Those hemlock knots had destroyed my razor sharp knife that I'd been getting all tuned up for the bush. And I never noticed it until I was all done. I looked at this knife and it was just destroyed. I'm like, oh no, what did I just do? I went back out into estuary with a couple rocks. I beat all the dimples out of the cutting edge, all these great big areas where the blades rolled over, with 2 rocks. It took me like probably a half an hour. I filmed all that and it didn't make it, but I destroyed my knife right off the bat. And I should know better. I burn wood. I've been a carpenter and a mason for 20 years. I deal with hemlock all the time. And frankly, I hate hemlock. It's heavy, it's brittle, the knots are just horrible. Loggers have a hard time with hemlock because it'll split up the trunk. Hemlock is just garbage. I just hate that wood for 50 different reasons. And there's another reason to add to the pile. The knots are super hard and it just chipped my knife to pieces. There's an interesting story from boot camp. When you're at boot camp, you've got all these different things you need to do, you know, and you're being evaluated on it. And the consultants, the survival consultants that the show hires, they took us out to this big state area and they're like, go build some shelters. And Brooke and I went to this beautiful flat spot, and we were just gonna fly our bivvies off some lines just to keep the dew off, because it looked like it was good weather. And we're just kind of, you know, goofing around with these bivvies, and the guys come over and they're like, what are you guys doing? We're like, well, we're just gonna string the bivvies up the best we can just to keep the dew off us. And they're like, nah, that's really not what we're looking for. And you're kind of panicked because you're trying to get that spot on the show, and you're in an area that's probably been camped in for 50 years and there's not a ton to work with. And these guys are like, yeah, that's not what we're looking for. So it's like, oh, okay, you know, we'll have to start again from scratch. And you kind of got a time to do this in. So Brooke and I, we just head down this hill. And I mean, we head down this hill. It's a big, long hill. We get to the bottom where nobody's been camping, and there's crap everywhere. There's all kinds of stuff to use. And we built a big pole debris shelter, and but we were so far away from the area that everyone was kind of gathering in. Once we got it done, we're like, hey, you guys gonna come down and take a look at our shelter? And they're like, nah. It was like a quarter mile down this hill, and they're like, yeah, you guys are all right. But We built this awesome shelter and no one ever came to see it because it was too far away. One of the PAs came down. They brought us a camera so we could just film what we were doing, and just a little flip camera, and they got to see our shelter, but nobody else made the trip. I have to say that I loved all the time out on Alone. I had a fantastic time. I loved being in that country. I loved our spot. Just waking up and fishing for your food every day. Very simple existence. I just loved every minute of it. It was a great time. And anybody that puts in for the show and applies in the future, I wish you the best of luck. Just have a good time with it. Some people, it's been kind of miserable. Some people have really enjoyed it. I have to say, for myself and Brooke, we had a great time. It's a little rough, you know, because you're starving slowly. But all in all, it was fantastic. And if you guys have watched this channel before, you know that I dealt with a stomach condition called sclerosing mesenteritis. And between 2006 and 2010, I was in and out of the hospital with this stuff. And I'm generally about 235, 240. And when I went to the Mayo Clinic and had my surgery that ultimately fixed my guts, I was 139. So I'm no stranger to starving. That part of Alone there's no new ground there. The starvation end of it never bothered me a bit. Didn't affect me in the least. It really bothered Brooke because she'd never lost a ton of weight. She'd never been starving voluntarily or otherwise. But the starvation part of it didn't bug me. And I told that story of being sick and how it was a good preparation for being on Alone, to have gone through multiple different episodes of starvation, and ultimately, I mean, I was on my way out. I was in Mayo for 2 weeks back in 2010, and I was so malnourished because I just couldn't eat. I felt like I'd been gut shot all the time. So I couldn't eat. I couldn't keep any weight on. But the starving angle out there, it never bothered me a bit. One of the most interesting moments out there, it didn't get filmed. The story's never been told. One evening, I couldn't find my knife. And you're using your knife all the time out there. It's on your side or in your hand pretty much all the time. It's something, you know, you don't want to not have your knife. And I looked everywhere and I couldn't find it. This is probably like day 35, day 40, something like that. So I mean, it was getting, you know, you're getting a little loopy, getting a little starvy. You're not probably thinking straight. I couldn't find my knife. It was driving me nuts, and I was thinking about ways to improvise a knife and what was available, and just couldn't get it out of my mind. It was driving me crazy. About 1 o'clock that morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up out of bed, said, I have to go find my knife. Where we fished, I'd always take my knife down there and I'd smack the fish with the knife, and I'd use it for, you know, rigging lines and stuff. And I thought I probably had set the knife on the rocks. Now these rocks, they like 45 right down into the ocean, and then there's a drop off. And during bad weather, the tide's just washing that rock face. And I'm like, if that knife is right on those rocks and the tide comes up and it gets a little bit windy, it will take the knife off and it'll go right off the drop off, and I won't have it. So I'm like, I have to go find it. So I put on my rain gear, I put on my headlamp, and I walk, I don't know, it's probably a quarter mile or so through the woods down this point to where we fished. And it's pitch black and it's raining. And I look all over the rocks, and I'm looking all over the rocks and all over the rocks, and I cannot find my knife. It's nowhere. So I'm standing, it's like a low tide. So I'm standing right at the edge of the drop-off, and where the big barnacles are and the big clams, and it's where the water's about as low as it gets. And it's like 20 foot straight down right after. If I took one step, I could just step off the drop-off where I was at. Finally consigned myself to the fact that I can't find my knife, so I turned around to head back. My headlamp went off. Now those stupid headlamps, that production gives you. They're a rechargeable headlamp, because you have all these camera batteries, and you have these anchor batteries to recharge camera batteries to recharge other stuff. And so they evidently in their wisdom thought it was the best thing to have a rechargeable headlamp. The only problem with that is that headlamp, once it gets to a certain charge, it doesn't get dimmer, it shuts off. So I'm a quarter mile or so from the cabin. I'm in the utter darkness. I'm standing right at the edge of a 20-foot drop off into the, you know, where it's just water, right? I could put my foot in the water, but where the rocks drop off, it's 20 feet of water to the bottom. And I'm like on this 45 rock face, and it's utterly black. I mean, it's just black. And I sat there for probably 15 minutes just going, oh my goodness. What a thing to get into. 20 minutes ago I was in bed. Now I'm a quarter mile from camp. I'm stuck on this rock face. It's pitch dark. And I'm really not sure what to do in this situation. Well, we fished on those rocks all the time. So I'm like, I just kept my eyes shut. Now I'm waiting for my eyes to adjust. Hopefully I'll be able to see like the silhouette of something. After about 15 minutes, I could just distinguish the tree line from the sky. So I just started climbing up, hand and foot, over this rock face. And we fished it all the time, so I knew it fairly well. And I just climbed towards the woods. And when I got to the woods, I actually found, with my hands, our fishing spools, our spools of line. We'd leave them right down there by the rocks. So I'm like, okay, I know exactly where I'm at. And I stood up and started walking into the woods at that point. And once I was in the woods, it was literally like I was in a coal mine. I couldn't see anything. So I'm to the point where my only option at that point is to yell for Brooke. I'm like, hey, honey! She panics because she thinks I fell in. She gets her stuff on and comes running down. And she ends up like way over in the woods, like 50 yards to the wrong side, just disoriented, because when it's that dark, she had her headlamp, but you know, you lose the trail and you're really not sure where you're at. If I would have tried to walk out there, I don't know if I would have made it back, because it was so dark, completely dark. I would have had to probably crawl most of that way, and there were spots where there was drop-offs down into the estuary. Yeah, I'd have had to avoid that. So to make a long story short, never, ever, 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 ever buy a headlamp that shuts off. Make sure you get a headlamp that just progressively gets dimmer the longer you have it on. Even a half of a quarter of a candle light, I could have found my way back. But in pitch darkness, you can't go anywhere. I couldn't see anything. So anyway, Brooke comes and gets me. We walk back to the cabin, go back to bed. I get up the next day, I walk down to the beach, and I check this log where we set stuff from time to time. And my knife was sitting right there. And then it clicked. I completely remembered putting the knife in that spot. I remembered why I was using it there and why I left it right there. And the other day, all that information was just completely MIA. I had no idea where I'd left it. I had no recollection of using it. Nothing. All I could think of was I'd lost it and I didn't know where it was. But once I saw where it was the next day, it made total sense. I'm like, oh yeah, I completely remembered. So if you get 20, 30, 40 days, 50 days in, don't set your knife down somewhere because you might not remember where it was. So those are some of my favorite stories that never made it to the air from Alone that I want to share with you guys. I hope everybody else that's been on the show gets a chance at some point to tell all their stories. Because there's been, what, 40 of us, 50 of us that have been on the show? All of us have stories that never got covered. Lots and lots of time out there. Very little of that time gets shown. Lots of good stories. Or stuff that would have made it to TV, but nobody had a camera on at that time. But it's up to you to run the camera all the time, and if you shut it off for some reason, something cool will happen. You will miss it. It'll never make it to TV. No one will ever hear that story. I hope you guys have found this video interesting. Don't forget to hit the share button and the sub button and hit the little bell. Thank you guys for watching my channel, Bush Radical. My name is Dave Whipple. Be radical, eh? See you soon.